delighted to say that in the correct fashion, our heavy haulage tractors, which are leading the display, are being preceded by their escort vehicle, which is a suitably period van. This is the Bedford CF, which was the replacement for the Bedford CA, which for 15 years or so the CA had been the van that everybody bought, everybody used. And when the CF came in, about 1968 I think it was, Bedford's had the misfortune to clash with the launch by Ford's of their Transit. And so the CF is a very good van, but it didn't find anything like the market that its predecessor, the CA, had, because the Transit swept all before it.
The CF, if you look at this, it's very reminiscent of an American van. I think they must have stolen some styling from the Chevy van.
Well, of course, that was typical of the GM group at the time, and for a long time before that. Now we can get into the meat of the business, ladies and gentlemen. A fantastic parade of the heaviest of heavy haulage tractors, and they are being led by the two Fawns, German machines that are in the colours of ALE, Abnormal Load Engineering of Stafford, one of our foremost heavy hauliers of the last 50 years. And really we are incredibly honoured and delighted to see these vast machines here in the arena. Rare sight indeed.
This first one has got a 600 horsepower V12 engine driving an automatic transmission, which then has another gearbox behind it, giving another 3 speeds. It can easily move 300-400 tons on its own. It was made originally as a evaluation vehicle and went to the Middle East to try and be a tank transporter with an articulated trailer behind, but it wasn't successful, so ALE bought it probably at a good price and put a ballast box on it, and now spent the next 20 years using it as a heavy haulage tractor.
And you will notice, ladies and gentlemen, as these tractors go round, that the styling of the ballast box and indeed the running boards around the big Fawns is very similar, very reminiscent of the Mark II Scammell contractors, the pair of which now follow it. And the contractor was the biggest of the Scammell civilian heavy haulage tractors, the last one they produced really of this type. And they only made 4 of them. We've got a pair of the 4 here, and they were basically a Winds commission, weren't they?
They were. Winds wanted a bigger engine and an automatic transmission. They said, well, if you don't make one, we'll modify an old one. So they went to Watford and spoke to Mr. Anderson, their head mechanic, and this is what they came up with. It has a 19-litre Cummins engine of 450 horsepower. The later Scammell contractors were actually rated for 200 and was re-imported from the Middle East by ALE to go back to work again. The next one, the blue one, which we say in the lorry job, we say it has an LAD cab, which is a motor panels cab, which was suitable for a Leyland, Albion and a Dodge. And Scammell's, for their lighter weight contractors, used this cab. This particular one spent all of its working life in Austria and has an AC 1100 engine. It's something we never see in this country at all, just in an industrial engine, maybe in rail locomotives.
I think it was a rail car engine principally, yes. The majority of the Scammell contractors, the Mark I Scammell contractors, of which this is an example, had Cummins engines rated up to 335 horsepower, and they drove through an 8-speed self-changing gears semi-automatic gearbox, which was a very, very handy, very effective gearbox up to a certain power rating. But it wasn't strong enough as a gearbox to cope with the additional power of the 19-litre fitted in the Mark IIs, which is why they went, like the Fawns, with the Allinson automatic.
If you look at the Army lorry, which has 4 axles, 4 rows of wheels, this is a lorry which started off its life in the American Army as a tank transporter. It's fitted with a 2-stroke engine. You might hear that the noise is slightly different. It's a higher pitch noise because it's a 2-stroke, and that means it's firing on every revolution, unlike the other ones which are all 4-stroke and fire every other revolution. It has also an Allison automatic transmission. A normal gearbox can't handle the loads that you expect to push through them if you just brake. So you use an automatic.
And then we've got some other heavy haulage tractors following on behind, led by a Scammell S26.
I I think it started off its life as an army one. The Soma axles, but the standard T45 Leyland road train cab, which we might see later on as in the guise of a normal tractor unit, but they were also used for heavy haulage.
And the army used them as their medium-weight tank transporters, didn't they?
With a crane through-haul trailer, and it took over from the Scammell Crusader.
And then we've got another heavy haulage tractor in the Tony Morgan colours, and this is the Volvo. What did we learn about that when we saw it yesterday, Mark?
It has the, you'll notice the axles on the back are different to the red one in front. They've got the same axles as a lightweight Scammell contractor, but it's 400 horsepower Cummins, big cam engine. Certainly it's an import line, but that part.
And you got out of the cab with something like an ERF A series or an Atkinson Borderer,
which is following on,
and then got into one of these Volvos. It was like moving from a pre-war old banger up to a modern car. I mean, the level of comfort and driver ergonomics was in a different world.
They have a bed in for a start. I mean, drivers weren't used to it. Once they'd been in a Scandinavian or a European lorry with a bed in it, they wouldn't go back to the old ERFs and Atkinsons. And the Atkinson, talking which following, is an ex-Pickford's 6x4 tractor unit called a Venturer. It has an 8-cylinder Gardner engine. When the rules decreed that you need to have 6 brake horsepower
and distribution.
When you look at these two Scammell Contractor Mark IIs, they're just in profile. They are the perfect setup for heavy haulage. The engine at the front, the driver in the middle with the winch, and then all the ballast over the wheels to apply the traction.
The only thing they really lacked, but they couldn't cope with at this weight and power.
So Gardner's got over this by developing an 8-cylinder engine. You'll notice that 2 cylinders of it are sticking out of the back of the cab because it's much longer than a normal engine.
And these Atkinson Venturers, and I think there was a batch of 12 of them made, wasn't there?
Yes, Pickford's had 12.
I drove one when it was on the fairgrounds with Carter's, and it was definitely my favourite lorry on the fair. And it's got, as you say, the 8-cylinder Gardner is a lovely smooth engine, and the 9-speed full of road ranger gear.